Hi friends, welcome back to the shop. I'm Cale. We all have tools in our shop that we would probably rethink if we could buy them all over again. But not every regret is a mistake. Sometimes it's just a lesson learned in how we actually work in our shop versus how we thought we'd work. Today I'm sharing 5 tools that I would rethink if I had the opportunity to do so. Not because these tools are bad tools. In fact, most of them are exceptional. I've just learned over the years that not every great tool has a place in my shop, and as time and what I do in my shop has changed, so have my tools. One of the things I've developed over the years is something I call TBUFR. I'll share more about that in just a few minutes. But first, let's get these 5 tool regrets out in the open so we can talk about them. Regret number 1, buying an expensive track saw and track when my earlier version of my Bora and circular saw worked just fine. Now, like I said earlier, it's not that this is a bad tool, it's an exceptional tool. It just doesn't really have a fit and a place in my shop for the way I work. Now, if you're cutting flat panel sheet goods all day long and that's all you do in your shop and you're building cabinets and you're looking to make long straight cuts, then perhaps you could justify the expense difference between this tool and this fence versus this tool and this fence. In my case, I can't. So there was a lesson learned there that sometimes what you have on hand is good enough for what you're doing. Regret number 2, a cordless shop vac. Not only was this thing crazy expensive, but at the time I was doing a lot of client installation work. I thought it would be great to have something like this that I could take into my client's home. I thought it would be quiet, clean, and self-contained because it's battery operated. And it uses the same batteries from the rest of my Milwaukee tools. Well, turns out I don't really do client installation work anymore. I do mostly commissions. Turns out that this isn't very quiet. Turns out that the filter in it pumps out a ton of dust if you light it off in somebody's living room. So be prepared to clean their whole house. So anymore, I take my Festool CT26 dust collector with me if I need to go to a client site. No, that's not just boasting about expensive tools. One of the things that Festool got right with their dust collectors is that they are HEPA rated. That means that the bag collects all the tiny filtered dust that comes in and doesn't let any of it go out the exhaust port. So I could take that into somebody's living room, clean up my mess. It's totally self-contained. Yes, it's expensive, but I use it every day in my shop, whether I'm sanding, cross-cutting on the miter saw, or going to a client site to clean up. It's a great example of an expensive tool that fits all of my needs in my shop. This guy lives under a bench and never gets used. Regret number 3, buying an underpowered drum sander. Remember when I mentioned earlier that not every regret is a mistake? So this is a great drum sander. I use it all the time. I love it. Where was my mistake or my regret? It was in buying a 110 volt version of this sander instead of a 220 volt. So if you're not familiar with how these tools work, when a tool's underpowered like this one is, you can only take really small bites when it comes to sanding, and you can really only use 80 grit sandpaper. Anything finer and the drum's going to heat up, the motor's going to heat up from the resistance, and that's going to go back to your circuit breaker and trip a breaker. So again, it's a great tool. I love it. If I could buy it over again, I'd buy something with a power rating that matches what my shop has to offer and what my needs are as a woodworker. Regret number 4, buying the Capex KS120 miter saw instead of the Bosch compound miter saw. Now, is this a bad tool? No, not at all. It's probably the tool that gets used the most in my shop, and it's great. It works perfectly. If I could buy it all over again, would I? I would. Why? Well, this can't be mounted as close to the wall as the Bosch could, and in my case, that would give me another 5 or 6 inches that I could get in floor space. Second, I didn't know it at the time, but when you're making a ton of cuts, and trust me, I make a ton of cuts with this thing, this vertical hand placement is just not comfortable for me. The Bosch has the horizontal hand placement, which just seems more ergonomically correct, and I think would probably work better for somebody who's making a few hundred cuts a day with this thing. So again, it's not a regret, it's not a mistake, it's just if I could do it differently, I would. And those are the reasons why. Small little gemstone in there for you. If you're considering a tool these are the kinds of things that you really need to be thinking about, because once you get it in your shop and get it all set up, you're probably going to be like me and you're just going to suck it up and use it. And finally, regret and mistake number 5 is dangerous shop furniture. I absolutely despise this crazy expensive little DeWalt stool because it's designed by somebody who never sat and moved around in a rolling stool. Every time you try to move with this thing, it falls over. And this is in its lowest setting. If you put it all the way up, it gets even more unsafe. I wish I'd never bought this tool. I wish it wasn't in my shop. I think of it as a stationary only tool. It sits in front of a computer, and if I have to move around, I get up. So anyway, this stool can go straight in the trash. Okay, I mentioned earlier that I now use a system that I developed called TBUFR. It's not fancy, but it works for me. Maybe it'll work for you. So what is it? Time is the T, and it is a question that I ask myself when I'm thinking about a new tool. Will this tool save me time, or will it just make me look faster? The B is for budget. With my particular budgeting style, I still work full-time, so woodworking is not a full-time endeavor for me. So what I do is I look at the cheapest tool on the market and the most expensive tool on the market, and I find that 60 to 70% price range, and that's where I tend to find optimal value for me. It may be different for you, but it's helpful to look at the range of pricing and quality and reviews of the particular tool you're looking at, and then consider, with all of the other factors in TBUFR that we're going to go through, how well does that tool fit? So that's the B. The U is units. How many units of a particular thing am I making? Is this a one-off? Am I making just one of these dog bones for my workbench? If that's the case, I probably don't need a tool that just makes one of these. But if I'm making 25 or 30 of them, or if this is what I'm selling on my Etsy marketplace, I'm not, by the way. But if I'm making these units, 100 of them a week to sell, then perhaps that tool, if it helps me produce those units, is helpful, and you should consider getting it. So that's the U. The F is frequency. How often do I use this tool? I have a really nice combination disc and belt sander back there that I used to make hardwood. I'll put one up on the screen. I used to make these keepsake boxes, candy boxes, with custom resin inlays. I don't make them anymore. And back when I was making those boxes, that sander was awesome. It worked great. But now that I don't make those boxes anymore, honestly, I use the belt sander for sharpening my carpenter's pencils. That's pretty embarrassing. But anyway, that's the F, frequency of use. And then finally, R is repeatability. If this tool that I'm looking at, can it help me make repeatable and sustainably accurate cuts or reproductions of the thing that I'm making? If the answer is yes, then cool, it gets a check in the box. And for me personally, anymore, I try to make sure that a tool gets a yes in at least 3 or 4 of those categories, or I just pass, because I'm just like you. I watch woodworking videos on YouTube, I see cool new tools, and I think, man, I need that. And sometimes I get it, and then it just becomes a dust collection in my shop, and not that kind of dust collection. So anyway, TBUFR, time, budget, units, frequency, and repeatability. I hope you'll consider those when you're making tool purchases, and I hope you found something useful from this video. If you don't mind, please consider liking and subscribing. It really helps the channel a lot, and it tells me that you like what I'm doing and encourages me to make more. So that's it for me, friends. Until next time, peace, love, and sawdust. I'm out.